All right, so we are continuing on now with the book of John, the Gospel of John in the New Testament, and we are somewhere around chapter 3, verse 2, I think. I have to say I think because it puts it at the top of the page here, but none of the verses or chapters are marked, which is one of the reasons I liked it, this translation, because there's no numbers for references. It's just written like a text. And so it's funny how that really changes the way you read it. Uh, it's the only Bible I've ever read that didn't have verses all marked up in it with all kinds of little notations. This one has none. It's just the text. And so when you read that, you read it differently. It comes across differently. So, yeah. So we're in chapter 3 there. And we've been, Jesus went to his well, first of all, it started off with John the Baptist introducing himself and kind of saying that he was just the voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord, that Jesus, the coming Messiah, the Christ, was about to come, and that he was just announcing his coming. And then the next scene that we have is Jesus at the wedding party with his mother, and his mother comes and tells him and some people standing with him that they're out of wine and the party's just begun. And Jesus, is like, well, what does that have to do with me? And his mom just kind of rolls her eyes and tells the guests there with him, do whatever he tells you. And she goes on, So then he tells them to fill these big pots up, the water, the pots that hold the water for purification usually, tells them to fill those pots up and then to take a ladle and fill a glass and take it to the master of the wedding. So he does that, they do that, and of course the water is now some of the best wine that the host has ever had. And so he was talking, he did that. Then after that, people are asking him, so he goes in during the Passover then and turns over all the tables of the money changers that have been placed in the temple for buying sacrifices and knickknacks and souvenirs for the temple. And he gives them that huge lecture, not lecture, but drives them out with a whip, throws the tables over. And we made the point that that's kind of what his whole coming was about, that up until that point, religion was transactional for the Jews. If they sinned, they had to offer a turtle dove. And if they did this sin, they had to offer a cow. And if they did a whole bunch of sins, they had to offer a goat. And so it was very transactional in their relationship with God. And um, so when he came, he was God's sacrifice to us. And so it kind of flips the tables, and the paradigm flipped then within the Judeo-Christian religion. The table flipped. No longer were sacrifices required for approaching God. Now God could be approached through the Christ and addressed directly. You no longer needed a priest in between the two of you. And so he kind of makes that point when he throws out the transactional nature, the mercantile element in the temple, throws them all out, and says, "How dare you turn my father's house into a merchant's exchange?" Right? And so it was a real statement about the whole nature of religion was about to flip, at least within this tradition, and that it was now going to be based on something quite different than behavior, and it was going to be based on grace at this point, from this point on. So that's where we left it off. And now we're going to talk about Nicodemus, if you've heard of him. So there was a man among the Pharisees. Now I don't remember what the difference between the Pharisees and the Sadducees were. I think one had a stronger notion of the afterlife than the other one. But anyway, they were basically two distinctions of the ruling class of the Jews, like the Brahmins for Hindus. The Brahmins were kind of the privileged class. Here, the Pharisees and Sadducees would have been Brahmin pundits, as it were. And so there was a man among the Pharisees, Nicodemus by name, a counselor of the Jews. He came to Jesus at night and said to him, Master, we know that you came as a teacher from God, For no one could perform the miracles that you perform if God were not with him. Jesus answered and said to him, Truly, truly, I tell you, if one is not born from above, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus said to him, How can a man be born when he is old? Surely he cannot enter his mother's womb a second time and be born. Jesus answered, Truly, truly, I tell you, if one is not born from water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. What is born from the flesh is flesh, and what is born from the spirit is spirit. Do not wonder because I told you, you must be born from above. The wind blows where it will, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone who is born from the Spirit. Nicodemus answered and said to him, How can this happen? Jesus answered and said to him, You are the teacher of Israel, and you do not understand this. Truly, truly, I tell you, that we tell you what we know and testify to what we have seen, and you do not accept our testimony. If I tell you of earthly matters and you do not believe, how will you believe if I tell you of heavenly matters? And no one has gone up to heaven except the one who came down from heaven, the Son of Man. And as Moses raised up the snake in the desert, so must the Son of Man be raised up, so that everyone who believes in him may have everlasting life. All right, so this is another reference to an Old Testament story there as the snake was raised up. What happened here was that the Jews, the children of Israel, let's do that just so it doesn't sound like I'm being an anti-Semite. So the children of Israel had misbehaved in the desert, as was their was their habit. Actually, when you read the Old Testament and that whole Exodus period where they're going toward the Promised Land, it's just really a constant cycle of the Jews messing up, God getting angry, demanding some sort of payment. The Jews commemorate the day, say they're sorry, and move on until the next time. And they just seem to keep doing this over and over and over again. And so one of the times, I don't remember what they had done, but they got infested with vipers, these snakes that were running around, going around biting everybody now. And so Moses, goes to the Lord, cries to the Lord as he's had to do every time that they misbehave themselves, and begs God's mercy. And so God gives mercy and says, "Okay, take this staff that has a metallic serpent at the top of it, and hold it up. And whoever looks up at the snake, the poison from the viper that they've been bitten by will not kill them." I believe that's the story. And so that's what Jesus is talking about here, so that everyone who believes in me may not be destroyed, but may have everlasting life. If you look to me for grace, if you look up to me for grace, then your bite will not kill you. So it's another way, another metaphor for that, uh, for Jesus being the metaphor of grace. He is the source of grace. For God did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but so that the world could be saved through him. Oh, isn't that a breath of fresh air right there? Isn't that very different from how we feel about Christianity sometimes these days? That Jesus did not enter the world to judge the world. He entered the world that it could be saved, to present grace, to be the source of grace for the world. And so he's not a furtherance of that list of do's and don'ts, the enforcer of do's and don'ts. He's actually the pass for do's and don'ts. For God did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but so that the world could be saved through him. He who believes in him is not judged. He who does not believe in him has already been judged, because he did not believe in the name of the only Son of God. Right? So this belief in the name, you're not judged, right? Because you find your solace, you find your value, you find your definition of yourself in the grace of God, in the love of God, right? That without that grace, you stand by your own conscience, right? And that is how we are already judged, because it's very difficult to have a clear conscience without grace, right? Because all of us know our deeds. We all know our inner workings. And so, in a sense, we already have judged ourselves and held ourselves accountable. And so he's saying the way to transcend that is through the grace of God, so that you are still being given permission to set down your karma or to set down your sin on whatever vocabulary you want to use. That it's you can only set down your karma, escape your karma through grace, the grace of God, the love of God. And so even in Vedanta, all of our security, all of our strength, all of our hope is tied up in God, in the grace of God. And it's not a matter of performance. That all the world's traditions actually have grace as the element necessary for realization, for salvation. So he who does not believe in him has already been judged, namely by your own conscience, because you did not believe in the name of the only Son. This is the judgment, because the light came into the world, and people loved the darkness more than the light, because their actions were wicked. Right? We came into the world and we loved the darkness. Well, what is that darkness? Well, that darkness is ignorance. It's the ignorance of our nature. Instead of living according to the nature that was placed within us, which was the image of God, or in specifics in Vedanta, the Sat Chit Ananda, right? The three aspects of God, the divine principle of pure love, pure wisdom, through pure being, that that is the light. That is what we are. But we have identified with something different. We've identified with the temporary, with the body mind. And through that carrying on that identity of the body mind, we took on the nature of the flesh, as the Christians like to talk about it. We took on the nature of the flesh as being our own nature, and we took on the desires of the body as being our own desires. And so we have begun fulfilling the desires of body and fulfilling the desires of mind while neglecting spirit, which is our true nature. And so what he's talking about here is that we've come into this body and mind and we've identified with it and we've loved it. We've enjoyed our enjoyments and our pleasures and our vices and our little slips here and there, that we've become attached to them, right? And so because of that wickedness, our conscience is not clear, and so we're not comfortable in front of God anymore. You see that in the Old Testament. Remember the story of Adam and Eve, which I always go back to because that's a wonderful source for a description of the problem that we're in for the whole world. In that Eve, was tempted. She looked at that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, which was egoism. She looked at the fruit of egoism. And she, one, saw that it was beautiful, two, said that it looked like it would be good for food, and three, that it would make her like God, that it would fulfill her. And so she ate it. So that three-step process, put her in the dark because she, one, looked through her senses. Number two, let her senses define what she should have. And three, through having that, she would become fulfilled. It's the reason we run out and buy a Mercedes, thinking that we're going to be fulfilled by it, or a big house, or another girlfriend, or a third wife, or whatever it is we're up to these days. That we pick all these different things, thinking that we're going to be fulfilled, that somehow they're going to make our life happy. And that is the continual loop that we're in. And the reason I'm bringing it up here is that he's saying that they love the darkness more than the light because their actions were wicked. So when Eve became egotistical, looked at her, defined herself by her senses, obeyed her senses for her to decide what she needed, and then went and got those things through her senses, imbibed in them for her fulfillment. We see that the very next verse it says that God was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and that Adam and Eve ran and hid because they were aware of their nakedness, right? They ran and hid from God. And that's what it is to love the darkness more than light. It's like you serve the body and mind, and you love it and you don't want to let go of it. But inherently in yourself, you know, because your nature is spirit, your nature is not flesh, your nature is Satchitananda. And when you violate the principles of pure love and the principles of pure wisdom through your being, that your conscience gets tinged and you're uncomfortable in the light of God. You're uncomfortable in the light of awareness. And so you love darkness. You love to be distracted. Really, that's what darkness is distraction, right? Where you don't have to live with your conscience. You live distractedly, so you don't have to pay attention to your conscience. For everyone who does bad things hates the light and does not come toward the light, lest his actions be discovered. But he who accomplishes the truth comes toward the light, so that it may be made clear that his actions were with God. Right? So that light is that light of awareness, that light, that divine light of love, of awareness, of being. And that we love to live in that light when we're living according to our nature, according to Satchitananda. But we avoid that light and sometimes turn to our vices as distraction in order not to be confronted by that light of our nature, that light of Satchitananda, that light which reveals our shortcomings, our mistakes. After this, Jesus and his disciples went into the land of Judea, and there he spent some time with them and baptized. And John also was baptizing at Aenon, near Salim, because there were many waters there, and the people came to him and were baptized. For John had not yet been thrown into prison. Now there was a dispute between the disciples of John and a Jew about lustration. Lustration means purity, right? And they came to John and said to him, Master, the one who is with you beyond Jordan, to whom you testified, see, he is baptizing, and all come to him. John answered and said, A man cannot receive anything unless it has been given to him from heaven. You yourselves bear witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I said, I am sent before him. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom, who stands by and listens to him, rejoices with the joy that comes from the voice of the bridegroom. This is my joy, which is fulfilled. He must increase, and I must diminish. Right? So he's talking about here between the relationship between John the Baptist and Jesus the Christ. John comes initially and announces the way and says the Christ is about to be manifest to all of you, and tells everybody about him and tells him why he's coming and what he's about, kind of ushering in this new era. And then Jesus comes, and now the Sadducees are saying, now what's going on? You're over there baptizing, and this Jesus guy is now baptizing, and more people are starting to go to Jesus. What's going on, and who are you? Right? And so he's again reiterating his role. He must increase, and I must be diminished. He who comes from above is above all, and he who comes from the earth is of the earth and speaks from the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. What he testifies to is what he has seen and heard, and no one accepts his testimony. He who accepts his testimony proves that God is true. For he whom God sent speaks the words of God, and there is no measure to what the Spirit gives. The Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. He who believes in the Son has everlasting life, but he who disbelieves in the Son will not see life, but the anger of God remains upon him. All right. Yeah, so he's just positioning himself. I'm the friend of the bridegroom. I'm not the bridegroom. And that Jesus comes after me, and I'm not even worthy of untying his sandals. So I'm just announcing his way and clearing the way and preparing you to receive him, to know that this momentous occasion is upon us and imminent. And he's making clear that he's being sent by God and he's sharing the things of God. All right. When the Lord realized that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making more converts than John and baptizing them, in fact, Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went back to Galilee. He had to pass through Samaria. So he came to the city in Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the piece of land which Jacob gave to Joseph his son. There was a well of Jacob there. Now Jesus was tired from his journey and sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone off to the city to buy provisions. So the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, are asking for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." See, it's not just the Indians that have this caste system, that won't let different people touch other people and accept food or water or drink from others based on their position or whatnot. So the Samaritans, these were Jews that lived outside of Jerusalem. Some of them had intermarried and whatever had other reasons not to be able to live in Jerusalem. So they're living there. And as a matter of fact, if someone had their back to Jerusalem and walking through Samaria, an upright Jew would not talk to them because they had their back to Jerusalem and were moving away from Jerusalem, right? And so this is that kind of thinking. So how is it that you, a Jew, are asking for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." She said to him, "Lord, you have no bucket to let down, and the well is deep. From where do you have this living water? Surely you are not greater than Jacob our father, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his cattle." Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks from this water will be thirsty again, but he who drinks from the water that I will give him will not be thirsty forevermore. But the water I shall give him will turn within him into a spring of water, jetting up into everlasting life." Beautiful promise. The water that he would give would be the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the divine, and that water would quench your thirst, take away your desire. And it's very interesting because, Ramakrishna said something very similar. Do you remember that woman whose husband was a drunkard? He had beaten her, and she came to Ramakrishna just begging for help. And Ramakrishna said, bring your husband here with you sometime. And she said, "Oh, he'll never come." He says, "Well, tell him if he comes here, I shall give him a drink of liquor from which the intoxication will never end." And so the woman says, "Oh, well, that's a good idea." All right, I'll tell him that. And so it's interesting that Jesus and Ramakrishna are offering the same thing. Here's a drink that if you drink this, you will be forever satisfied, right? It will awaken your inner life. It will make you aware of that divine spring that you have within you, through which the love of God flows from the absolute unchanging into the world of expression, into the world of manifestation, right? Where you will always have your fill of love. You will not have to seek or beg anymore. "Whoever drinks from this water will be thirsty again, but he who drinks from the water I shall give will never be thirsty forevermore. But the water that I shall give him will turn within him into a spring of water, jetting up into everlasting life." Right? So through his teaching, you become connected with your own divinity. And from that spring of divinity, that spring of Satchitananda, which is your nature, welling up inside you, once you find that, once you touch that, you will need nothing from anywhere else ever again. The woman said to him, "Lord, give me this water so that I shall not be thirsty or have to come here to draw it up." He said to her, "Go and tell your husband and come back." The woman answered and said to him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You did well to say that you have no husband, because you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you said is true." The woman said to him, "Lord, I see that you are a prophet." All right, so she's a little nervous. I see that you're a prophet. Now it's interesting. She recognizes him as a prophet, but now look what she does. This is quite fascinating. It's a good lesson in human nature. The woman said to him, "Lord, I see that you are a prophet. You know, our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you people say that Jerusalem is the place where one should worship." Jesus said to her, "Believe me, madam, the time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, because salvation comes from the Jews. But the time is coming, and it is now, when the true worshiper will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father looks for such worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in the spirit and in truth. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah, who is called the Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will tell us all." Jesus said to her, "I am he who is talking to you." Wow. Can you can you even imagine the chill that would go through your body at that moment? You know, if you were Jewish and you had this notion of a Messiah that was going to come as the Lamb of God, that would be the bearer of grace for you, and you mention, "Oh yes, I know, I'm waiting for the Messiah. When he comes, I'll deal with that." And then this person you're talking says, "That is me who is talking with you." Oh my God. What a That's one of those moments that would be beautiful to be able to go back to. You know, you always think if you had a time machine, where would you go back to? And I often think, I've often thought of different times that would be interesting. And I would love to go back to this well and be there for this conversation that's happening right now, just to see this unfold in front of me would be, wow, quite an amazing thing. Jesus said to her, "I am he talking to you." Thereupon his disciples came and were surprised that he had been talking to a woman. But no one said, "What are you looking for?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then the woman left her water jar and went off to the city and said to the people, "Come, come and see a man who told me everything that I have done. Might he not be the Christ?" They went forth from the city and came to him. In the meanwhile, his disciples questioned him and said to him, "Master, eat." But he said to them, "I have food to eat which you do not know." So the disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him something to eat?" Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of he who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say there are 4 more months and then comes the harvest? But see, I tell you, raise up your eyes and look at the fields. See, they are white for harvesting. And now he who reaps takes his wages and gathers the crop for everlasting life, so that the sower and the reaper alike can be happy. For in this matter it is true to say that the sower is one person and the reaper another. I sent you to harvest what you never labored on. Others labored, and you came in upon their labor. And many Samaritans came from that city. They believed in him because of what the woman said. And when she testified, he told me everything that I have done. So when the Samaritans came to him, they invited him to stay with them, and he stayed there for 2 days. And many more believed in him because of what he himself said. And they said to the woman, "It is no longer because of your talk that we believe. We ourselves have heard, and we know that this is truly the Savior of the world." And that's an important step that always has to happen right there. You know, you have to make your faith your own. You have to make your relationship with the beloved your own. We often inherit this from our father or parents or we grew up with this church or our family went to that church and we have these traditions. But you see, at some point, it has to become yours. You have to make it your own. You can't do somebody else's religion, somebody else's ideal. At the end of the 2 days, he went from there to Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. But when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, for they had seen what he did in Jerusalem at the festival, since they had themselves gone to the festival. So then he returned to Cana in Galilee, where he made the water into wine. And there was a certain prince whose son was sick in Capernaum. This man, hearing that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, went to him and asked him to come to his house and to heal his son, for he was going to die. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you see miracles and wonders, you will not believe." But the prince said to him, "Lord, come to my house before my little boy dies." Jesus said to him, "Go on your way, your son lives." The man believed in the words of Jesus that he had spoken to him and went on his way. And just as he was coming home, his slaves met him, saying that his son was alive. So he asked them at what hour he had got better. And they said, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." So the father realized that it was the very time when Jesus had said to him, "Your son lives." And he, with all his household, believed. This was the second miracle that Jesus performed when he came from Judea to Galilee. Everybody on board? Anybody have a question? All right. After that, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, for which the name in Hebrew is Bethzatha. It has 5 porches. There would lie a crowd of afflicted people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the water to be disturbed. For an angel of the Lord would come down to the pool from time to time, and the water would be disturbed. And whoever was first to enter the pool after the disturbing of the water would be healed of the infirmity that afflicted him. There was a man there who had his sickness for 38 years. And seeing him lying there, and knowing that he had had it for a long time, Jesus said to him, "Do you wish to be healthy?" The sick man answered, "Lord, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is disturbed, and while I am on my way, someone else gets there ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Arise, take up your bed, and walk." And immediately the man was healthy, and he took up his bed and he walked. It was the Sabbath on that day. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed today." But he answered them, "The man who made me healthy was the one who told me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" And they asked him, "Which is this man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" But the man who had been healed did not know who it was, since Jesus had disappeared into the crowd that was there. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you've become healthy. Sin no more, lest it be worse for you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him healthy, and that was why the Jews persecuted Jesus, because he did this on the Sabbath. But he answered them, "Until now, my Father has been doing his work, and I too am doing my work." For this the Jews sought all the more to kill him, because they not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he even called God his own Father, making himself equal to God. But Jesus answered and told them, "Truly, truly I tell you, the Son cannot do anything by himself unless he sees the Father doing it. For what he does, the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he himself does, and he will show him greater deeds than these for you to wonder at. For as the Father wakes the dead and gives them life, so the Son also gives life to whom he will. Right? So that's out. For whom the Father wakes the dead and gives them life. That's what spiritual life is. Waking us from the dead. What is the dead? That cyclical, habitual, material life. Get up in the morning, run your day, go back to bed, get up the next morning, right? God awakens us from that existence, gives us the notion of what we really are, who we really are, and sets us free to follow it. For as the Father wakes the dead and gives life to them, so the Son also gives life to whom he will. Nor does the Father judge anyone, but he has given all judgment to his Son, so that all may honor the Son as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Now, this is kind of interesting right here. Because here he says, nor does the Father judge anyone, but he has given all judgment to his Son. And just the page before, where we were reading here. Where did he say that I do not judge? Here it is. He says, for God did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but so that the world could be saved through him. And now we're reading something a little bit different than that. Here, nor does the Father judge anyone, but he has given all judgment to his Son, so that all may honor the Son as they honor the Father. Interesting there. It's something to ponder a little bit. That Jesus did not see his own commission as to judge the world, and yet here he's saying that God, the Father, does not judge, that he's given all judgment to the Son. But then initially he says that I didn't come to judge, right? So it may be that that's not his purpose, but that he has all that authority. But he withholds judgment because he's here not to judge, but to save, to give grace. So I guess in order to give grace, you have to do some judging. You have to know who needs grace, or look at it that way. Anyway, interesting that it's broken up that way. Truly, truly, I tell you that he who listens to my words, he who believes in him who sent me, has life everlasting and does not come to judgment, but has gone over from death to life. Truly, truly, I tell you, the time is coming, and it is now, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who have heard shall live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has given the Son life to have in himself. And he gave him authority to pass judgment, because he is the Son of Man. Do not wonder at this, because the hour is coming when those who are in the grave will hear his voice and come out, and those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. I cannot do anything by myself. I judge as I hear, and my judgment is just, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of him who sent me. If I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. He who testifies about me is someone else, and I know that that testimony he gives about me is true. You have sent to John, and he has testified to the truth. But I do not take my testimony from man. But I say this so that you may be saved. He who was the lamp that burns and shines, and you wish to exult for a time in his light. But I have testimony greater than John's, for the works that my Father gave me, for me to fulfill them, these same works that I do, testify concerning me that the Father sent me, and the Father who sent me has testified concerning me. You have never heard his voice or seen his shape, and you do not have his word remaining among you, because you do not believe the one he sent to you. You search the scriptures because you think that they have life everlasting in them, and it is they who testify to me, and you are not willing to come to me to have life. I do not receive glory from men, but I know you, and that you do not have the love of God in you. I came in the name of my Father, and you do not accept me. If someone else comes in his own name, you will accept him. How can you believe when you receive your glory from each other, and do not look for the glory that comes from God alone? Do not suppose that I shall accuse you to my Father. Your accuser is Moses, in whom you put your hopes. If you believed in Moses, you would have believed me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how shall you believe in my sayings? Right, so he's talking to Jews here about very Jewish things. That because the advent of the Christ is talked about in the Old Testament in a number of ways. It's kind of the whole paradigm of Judaism that at some point through the blessing of God blessing the lineage of Abraham, that there would be a savior, that would redeem the world. And there were signs that were given for that, and that was part of the story, the three wise men that see. Actually, we don't know how many wise men there were. We just know there were three gifts. But the wise men that came, they came from the east. They were not Jewish. They came from the east to welcome the Son, the new Christ, the new incarnation being born, which is a really beautiful point. That the first people to welcome Jesus were not Jewish, that they came from somewhere to the east. I like to think that they're sannyasins for a couple of reasons. One, they came from the east. Two, that they had been watching the stars. They had been depending on astrology, for discerning the times, and that's where they saw the star that announced the birth of the Christ in Bethlehem. And they came bearing gold, incense, gold, myrrh, and frankincense. Gold, myrrh, and frankincense, I think, were the three gifts. Anyway, but they come to him and they refer to them as great kings. Well, what is the translation of great king into Sanskrit? Maharaj. What do we call all of our sannyasins? Maharajas, great kings. And so I think it's rather interesting that three wise men, not Jewish, coming from the east, following the message of the stars to honor the Christ, bearing gifts to announce the coming of the incarnation. Because if who would be coming from outside of Judaism? Who would be coming to the birth of an incarnation? Well, the only people in the world that believed in incarnations at that point would have been the Hindus. The ones whose scripture tells them that every now and then I incarnate myself when Dharma is in trouble and reestablish Dharma in the world, right? So I like to think that those three wise men were three sannyasins who came, and so that it was three Vedantists who welcomed Christ to the world for the first time. How's that for a little toying with blasphemy? All right, so that's why he's talking about all of this testimony, because this coming Christ had been prophesied in the Old Testament, and they had been waiting around for a few hundred years for this Christ or this Savior to show up. And so there are certain signs that he was supposed to show that he was him. One of them was the dove ascending on his head when he got baptized, that the Spirit would ascend on him and stay there on him. That was one of the things, that there would be a man coming, a voice crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. And these different, anytime that he does a miracle, those miracles are always done in the spirit of a sign to demonstrate to the Jews that their Christ, their Messiah, has in fact come and that he is that. And so that's why he's very emphatic in here about who is bearing testimony to who. And because it's very important that he get his message at this point just to the Jews, because that's what's interesting when you read the New Testament. You see that initially, even Jesus himself is telling people, I only came for the Jews. It wasn't until later on in his ministry that it actually broadened out, and the centurion that comes to him to have his son healed, which might have been the prince here, he might have used the word prince instead of centurion to in translation, but basically, he was not Jewish, and God tells Jesus tells him, oh no, I came for the children of Israel. And the centurion says to him, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall off the table. And so he said, yes, it might be true you're here for the Jews, but I'm a dog trying to get the crumbs that are falling from their table. And Ramakrishna, Jesus is impressed, very overwhelmed actually, with the faith of the centurion, and tells the centurion at that point, he said, okay, your faith has healed your son. Go, your son is healed. And he goes home, and this exact story here, and he goes home and finds his son healed. And so that was the first time that Jesus reached out to the non-Jews. And they argue about that for quite a while in the New Testament when Saint Paul and there was a lot of discussion about whether Christians had to be circumcised because all Jews had to be circumcised. So now the Christians have to be circumcised too. And so they had a big argument about that and decided that no, that wasn't true, that the Christians did not have to continue circumcision. That was decided with Peter, I think, or Peter or Timothy. Actually, one of them, somebody was demanding that they get circumcised, and they were like, no, no, I don't think I have to do that. And so it was a big question back then. All right. What time are we looking at? All right, it's 5:24. Let's go ahead and stop there. It's a good stopping place for the day.